morning.
It's a nice car.
Oh, yeah, well, you know, in 2025, women can drive nice cars, you know.
And this is your car?
Yes, officer, it is.
What are you doing in this neighborhood? You live in this neighborhood. And this is your car.
Surprised that I live in this neighborhood. Why is that?
It's just not adding up.
It's not adding up. What are you adding up?
Are there any firearms, illegal contraband, drugs in this vehicle I need to be made aware of?
This traffic stop was about to become a career-ending mistake because the officer had no idea who he was really talking to. What happened in the next 10 minutes would cost him his badge, his reputation, and his future. And it all started with one assumption. It was a Saturday afternoon in Rosewood Estates, an upscale residential neighborhood where manicured lawns stretched between million-dollar homes, the kind of place where people waved at their neighbors and complained about property taxes. A silver Mercedes-Benz E-Class rolled through the tree-lined streets. Registered plates. Immaculate condition. Nothing out of the ordinary, except to Officer Derek Matthews. Matthews, an 8-year veteran of the department, watched the vehicle from his patrol car parked at the intersection. Something about it caught his attention. Or rather, something about the driver. He pulled out behind the Mercedes, followed it for 2 blocks, then hit his lights. The reason? Failure to signal a lane change. The woman behind the wheel, early 70s. Elegant, dressed casually but refined, checked her mirrors, and pulled over smoothly. She lowered her window and waited, hands visible on the steering wheel. Officer Matthews approached with the confident stride of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. On the surface, this looked like every other traffic stop, but his first words revealed something darker. License and registration, Matthews said, leaning down to peer into the vehicle. The woman handed over her documents without a word. Matthews examined them slowly, his eyes moving from the license to her face, then to the interior of the car. "This is a pretty expensive car," he said, his tone casual but pointed. "What do you do for a living?" "I'm retired," she replied evenly. "Retired from what? Does that matter for a failure to signal?" Matthews' jaw tightened slightly. "I'm asking the questions here." He studied her license again, taking his time. "Says, here you live on Rosewood Drive. That's what, a $2 million neighborhood? I've lived there for 15 years. 15 years. He said it like he was tasting the words, finding them suspicious. Interesting. He walked around the car slowly, peering into the back windows, examining the temporary inspection sticker on the windshield even though it was current. When he returned to her window, his tone had shifted from professional to openly skeptical. "Mind if I take a look inside?" The woman's expression didn't change. "Actually, I do mind. What's this about, officer?" Matthews straightened up, one hand resting on his belt. "Just routine questions, ma'am. Unless you've got something to hide?" "I have nothing to hide. But you stopped me for a turn signal. That doesn't give you the right to search my vehicle." This was his first mistake. Every word, every gesture, dripping with assumption. Not about what she'd done, but about who he thought she was. But before we see just how badly this spirals, if you've ever witnessed injustice or want to see how this plays out, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens next is a masterclass in why assumptions can destroy careers. Matthews shifted his weight, his tone hardening. "Ma'am, I'm gonna need you to open your trunk. Any drugs, weapons, or contraband in there?" The woman's voice remained steady. "Officer, I haven't given you any reason to search my vehicle. Your behavior is giving me reason. You're being evasive." "I'm not being evasive. I'm asserting my rights." Matthews let out a short laugh, shaking his head. "Oh, so you're a lawyer now?" "I know my rights, and I don't consent to a search." The officer's jaw tightened. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if waiting for her to back down. She didn't. "Step to the back of the vehicle," he said flatly. "Now." The woman complied, moving slowly and deliberately. "I'm complying under protest. This is unlawful." Matthews ignored her, popping the trunk himself and rifling through the contents. Grocery bags, gardening supplies, a leather briefcase. He opened the briefcase. Legal documents, old case files, nothing remotely incriminating. "What's all this?" he demanded, holding up a folder. Personal papers. He flipped through them, his frustration growing with each empty page. Nothing. No drugs. No weapons. No contraband. Just the belongings of a woman coming home from errands. He found nothing, because there was nothing to find. But he wasn't done. Matthews closed the trunk harder than necessary and walked back to where the woman stood. "Hand me your phone," he said. "Absolutely not. I can get a warrant. Then get one." They stood there, locked in a silent standoff. The officer's frustration was now fully visible: tight shoulders, clenched jaw, the slight flush creeping up his neck. He tried a different approach. "Where are you coming from?" "The grocery store." "At 2 p.m. on a Saturday? In this neighborhood?" The woman tilted her head slightly. "People grocery shop on Saturdays, officer. Don't get smart with me." She said nothing, just reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. Matthews' eyes narrowed. "What are you doing?" "Recording this interaction." "Put that phone away." His voice rose sharply. "I am legally allowed to record this." He stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. "I said put it away." She held the phone steady, camera pointed directly at him. "No." For a moment, Matthews looked like he might grab it. His hand twitched. But something stopped him, maybe the small voice in his head warning him he was already too deep, or maybe just the awareness that grabbing her phone would look even worse than everything else he'd already done. Instead, he threatened her. "You know what? You're going to be arrested for obstruction if you don't." "I'd like to speak to your supervisor," the woman interrupted calmly. Matthews actually laughed. A short, bitter sound. "My supervisor? For what?" "For violating my constitutional rights." "Lady, I don't have time for this. You're not getting a supervisor. Then I'm not moving until you call one. You're going to stand here in the heat and wait?" He shook his head, incredulous. "Good luck with that." The woman's expression didn't waver. "I've stood for longer, for more important things." Something in her tone made him pause. Just for a second. There was a weight to her words, a quiet authority that didn't match the profile he'd built in his head. But he was too deep now. His ego wouldn't let him back down. "Fine," he snapped. "Sit in your car. I'll write you every citation I can think of." He stalked back to his patrol car and sat there for 20 minutes, scribbling on his citation pad with aggressive, angry strokes. The woman returned to her Mercedes and waited, phone still recording, calm, patient. Neighbors started to notice. An older white couple across the street stood on their porch, watching. A man walking his dog slowed down, confused by the scene. One neighbor, a woman in yoga clothes, approached the patrol car. "Officer, is everything okay? Mrs. Holloway's lived here for years. Matthews waved her off aggressively. "Ma'am, step back. This is official police business." The neighbor retreated, but pulled out her own phone. 23 minutes. That's how long he made a 70-year-old woman wait in the sun. Because she asked for a supervisor. A second patrol car finally pulled up, not because Matthews called for one, but because the neighbor in yoga clothes did. Sergeant Luis Ramirez stepped out, taking in the scene with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen too many situations go sideways. He glanced at Matthews, then at the woman standing calmly beside her, Mercedes' phone still in hand. "What's going on here, Matthews?" The officer stood up straighter, defaulting to his report voice. "She was driving erratically, refused to cooperate, got hostile when I asked routine questions." Ramirez's eyebrow lifted slightly, but he walked over to the woman's vehicle. "Ma'am, I'm Sergeant Ramirez. What seems to be the problem?" The woman stepped forward and extended her hand professionally. "Sergeant, my name is Judge Margaret Holloway." Ramirez shook her hand, his expression neutral. Then she continued, "I served 22 years on the federal bench, 8 of those on the United States Supreme Court." The sergeant's eyes widened. Behind him, Matthews went completely still. The color drained from his face. Judge Holloway's voice remained calm, measured, precise, the same tone she'd used to deliver rulings from the bench for over 2 decades. "Your officer pulled me over for failure to signal, which I did signal. He then questioned whether I owned my vehicle, whether I lived in my own neighborhood, demanded to search my car without probable cause, and refused to call a supervisor when I requested one." She held up her phone. "It's all recorded. Every word. Every violation." Ramirez turned slowly to Matthews. "Is this true?" Matthews' mouth opened and closed. I didn't know. What you knew or didn't know about my identity is irrelevant. Judge Holloway cut through, her voice sharp now. Your conduct was unlawful, regardless of who I am. Matthews tried to salvage it. Your Honor, I apologize. I was just doing my... You were not doing your job. She didn't raise her voice, but the authority in it was unmistakable. You were profiling me. Sergeant Ramirez looked like he wanted to disappear into the pavement. Judge Holloway, I deeply apologize on behalf of, quote, Sergeant, I don't want apologies. I want accountability. She began detailing the violations with surgical precision. No emotion, just facts. Unlawful search of my vehicle. Denial of my request for a supervisor. Intimidation tactics designed to coerce compliance. Abuse of authority. Matthews' hands were trembling now. Judge Holloway continued. I spent 2 decades ensuring officers like him don't violate people's rights. I will be filing a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, the Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division, and the State Attorney General's office. She looked directly at Matthews. And I will pursue this until there are consequences. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Matthews stared at the ground, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Sergeant Ramirez stood between them, visibly furious but trying to maintain composure. Judge Holloway remained exactly as she'd been throughout the entire encounter. Dignified, composed, unshaken. Across the street, neighbors watched. 3 of them now had their phones out, recording. Matthews realized it then. The full weight of what he'd done. A federal judge, recorded evidence, multiple witnesses, his entire interaction documented from start to finish. His career was over. He knew it in that moment, saw it clearly. The termination hearing, the news stories, his name attached forever to this moment. No dialogue for 10 full seconds. Just the sound of distant traffic and birds in the trees. Finally, Ramirez spoke. Judge Holloway, we'll need a formal statement. I'll be at your precinct Monday morning with my attorney and copies of this footage. Matthews opened his mouth, closed it. There was nothing he could say that would fix this. Judge Holloway got into her car, started the engine, and drove away. Matthews watched her taillights disappear around the corner. In that moment, he knew his career was over. Within 48 hours, Officer Derek Matthews was placed on administrative leave. Judge Holloway didn't just file a complaint. She filed 3. 1 with Internal Affairs, 1 with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, 1 with the State Attorney General's office. Each complaint was detailed, documented, and accompanied by the full video recording. The department's body cam and dash cam footage was pulled and reviewed. It corroborated everything she'd said. The department spokesperson issued a carefully worded statement. We take all complaints seriously and are conducting a thorough investigation into the incident. By Monday evening, the story had broken on local news. Retired Supreme Court Justice, profiled by local officer during traffic stop. By Tuesday morning, it was national. The video went viral, 2 million views in 24 hours, then 5 million, then 10. Social media erupted. Number Justice for Judge Holloway trended on Twitter. Think pieces appeared in every major publication. Officer Matthews' name became synonymous with racial profiling. Inside the department, Sergeant Ramirez filed his own report. He noted Matthews' aggressive behavior, his refusal to call a supervisor, and critically his own observations that the stop seemed pretextual and racially motivated. Internal Affairs opened a formal investigation. And when they pulled Matthews' personnel file, they found something the department had been ignoring for years. A pattern, 17 prior complaints over 8 years. 13 of them involved minority drivers. None had resulted in serious discipline. The investigators found 3 that were particularly damning. Complaint number 1 came in Du Emilada Shinovi. A 28-year-old black man named Marcus Webb was pulled over for a broken taillight. When he got home and checked, the taillight was functioning perfectly. Matthews had searched his vehicle, found nothing, and let him go with a warning. Webb filed a complaint. It was dismissed as unsubstantiated. Webb was an elementary school teacher with no criminal record. Complaint number 2 was filed in 2021. A 45-year-old Hispanic woman named Rosa Delgado was stopped for expired registration. Her registration was current. She had the paperwork in her glove box to prove it. Matthews demanded to see her immigration papers. Rosa Delgado was born in San Antonio, Texas. She filed a complaint. Matthews received verbal counseling. There was no record of that counseling anywhere in his file. Complaint number 3 came in 2023. A 17-year-old black teenager named DeAndre Thomas was stopped while walking home from school. Matthews claimed he matched the description of a suspect. There were no active calls in the area. No suspect description had been issued. DeAndre's mother filed a formal complaint. It was marked unfounded within a week. DeAndre was an honor student. No criminal record, no disciplinary issues at school. The pattern was undeniable. Each complaint followed the same script: pretextual stops, searches without cause, intimidation, and each time the victims were people of color. The investigations had been cursory at best. Complaints were dismissed or downgraded. Matthews was always cleared or given minimal discipline that never appeared in his permanent record. No corrective action was ever taken. Supervisors had ignored the red flags for years. The police union had protected Matthews aggressively. The department's complaint process was designed to discourage filing, not encourage accountability. And there was no early warning system in place to flag officers with repeated complaints. 17 people had tried to hold Matthews accountable. 17 times the system had failed them. But Judge Holloway's case was different. Her credibility couldn't be dismissed. She had the resources to pursue justice. She had federal connections. And the media attention made a cover-up impossible. It took a Supreme Court justice to finally break through a system designed to protect officers like Derek Matthews. Matthews was suspended without pay. The police union filed a grievance immediately, claiming the suspension was premature and violated his due process rights. Judge Holloway authorized the public release of her footage. 2 million views in 24 hours. The Department of Justice opened a formal civil rights investigation not just into Matthews, but into the department's pattern of dismissing complaints. 3 more victims came forward. People who'd filed complaints years ago and been ignored. Now, with national attention on the case, they found their voices again. The local NAACP demanded federal intervention. Matthews hired a criminal defense attorney. Internal Affairs completed its investigation and recommended termination. The department tried to negotiate a quiet resignation, let Matthews leave with his pension intact, avoid the spectacle of a termination hearing. Judge Holloway refused. "This ends publicly," she told the department's attorney, "or not at all." The termination hearing was held. Matthews contested it, claiming he was just following his training and that he'd felt threatened. Training records were reviewed. Nothing in the department's protocols supported his actions. Body language experts reviewed the footage. Judge Holloway had shown no threatening behavior. Matthews was fired for cause. No pension, no benefits, no letter of recommendation. Federal charges were filed. Deprivation of rights, under color of law, a federal crime that carries up to 10 years in prison. He was also charged with false imprisonment and official misconduct. Matthews' attorney tried to negotiate a plea deal immediately. Matthews pleaded guilty to avoid trial. The sentencing hearing was brief. The judge, a colleague of Judge Holloway's, didn't mince words. "You abused your authority. You violated the constitutional rights of a citizen, and you did so based on the color of her skin." The sentence: 18 months in federal prison, suspended to probation, 2 years of supervised probation, 500 hours of community service, a $50,000 fine, and a permanent ban from law enforcement in any state. His name was entered into a national database that would prevent him from ever wearing a badge again. Judge Holloway filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Matthews and the department. The settlement came quickly: $275,000. Judge Holloway donated the entire amount to a legal defense fund for victims of police profiling who couldn't afford attorneys. The department was also forced to implement sweeping reforms: mandatory bias training every quarter, not annually; body cam review of every traffic stop that generated a complaint; an early warning system that flagged any officer with 3 or more complaints for automatic review; and an independent civilian oversight board with subpoena power. The ripple effects spread through the department. 6 other officers with troubling complaint patterns were identified. 3 quietly retired. 2 were terminated. Sergeant Ramirez, who de-escalated the situation and filed an honest report, was promoted. He became the training supervisor for a new program on constitutional policing. The department entered a 5-year consent decree with the Department of Justice. 1 traffic stop, 1 retired judge who refused to be silent, 1 officer who finally faced consequences. 6 months after the traffic stop, Judge Holloway gave a statement to reporters outside the federal courthouse. "I didn't pursue this case for revenge," she said. "I pursued it because I had the resources to fight back. Most people don't." She paused, her expression thoughtful. How many others were treated exactly like this and had no recourse, no platform, no justice? It was a question that hung in the air long after the press conference ended. Because Judge Holloway had something most victims of profiling don't have: legal knowledge, professional credibility, financial resources, a name that commanded respect. She could afford an attorney. She knew exactly which rights had been violated and how to articulate them. She had the social capital to make the system listen. Most people don't. Documentation made the difference. The video recording removed all ambiguity. It couldn't be dismissed or downplayed. It was evidence clear, unimpeachable, devastating. But accountability required more than evidence. It required persistence, resources, and a system willing to act. This officer is gone, his career over, his name permanently stained. But the real question is this: how many more officers like Derek Matthews are still out there, protected by a system that looks the other way? How many complaints are sitting in files right now, marked unfounded or unsubstantiated because the victims didn't have the power to demand justice? Judge Holloway won. But why did it take a Supreme Court justice to get justice? Judge Holloway used her voice when others couldn't. You can amplify theirs. If this story opened your eyes, hit that like button. If you believe in real accountability, subscribe and turn on notifications. And here's the big question: what punishment do you think Officer Matthews deserved? Was 18 months of probation enough, or should the consequences have been harsher? Drop your answer in the comments below. Let's discuss. And share this video because stories like this need to reach everyone. Justice shouldn't require a law degree or a federal judgeship. But until it doesn't, we keep telling these stories. See you in the next one.